All right, good afternoon. Today we launched the annual report of the Secretary General on the work of the organization. This year's report highlights the importance of multilateralism as the only path to address global challenges and shows the progress made over the last year in maintaining peace and security, protecting human rights, and promoting sustainable development. The report also underlines the importance of building partnerships with member states, regional and international organizations, and civil society to find, quote, find solutions to global problems that no nation alone can resolve. This is the beautiful, glossy annual report. It's also online on the UN News Center, and you should be able to find it. You should be able to download it online as well, or find it in the UN bookstore. In a statement we issued, a bit earlier today, the regional humanitarian coordinator for the Syria crisis, Panos Mumtzis, condemned the horrific attacks directed at civilians and civilian infrastructure in northwest Syria, which reportedly killed at least 116 civilians, many of them women and children, in Idlib and Aleppo governorates over the weekend. Mr. Mumtzis warned that military operations in Idlib and surrounding areas, similar to what we'd seen in other parts of Syria, will not only endanger many of the more than 3 million civilians in this densely populated area, but will also severely impact humanitarian partners and their abilities to deliver life-saving assistance. He added that it's imperative for all parties to the conflict and those with influence over them to come to a genuine and conclusive agreement to settle the conflict in Syria in a peaceful manner to prevent further suffering of the Syrian people. Civilians should not be a target, he said. And the heads of the UN food agencies, that's the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, and the World Food Program, will visit Niger starting tomorrow. They will be there to highlight the regional efforts to address the critical food and nutrition security situation in the Sahel. They will also underscore the joint efforts aimed at addressing poverty, underdevelopment, and the impacts of extreme weather and events in migration, factors that have all contributed to the region's critical humanitarian security situation. And the Sahel's lean season that runs from June to August nears its close. The latest estimates show that nearly 6 million people will have been severely food insecure during this period. And our humanitarian colleagues tell us that as of June 2018, an estimated 2.3 million Venezuelans out of the 32.8 million people who live there have fled the country, mainly to Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Brazil. People cite the lack of food as their main reason for fleeing, with reportedly 1.3 million people suffering from malnutrition. There have also been severe shortages of basic medicines and medical supplies, which have led to a sharp deterioration of the quality of hospitals. Our colleagues said that there's more than 100,000 HIV/AIDS patients at risk due to a lack of access to necessary medication, and that formerly eradicated diseases of measles, malaria, tuberculosis, and diphtheria are present and on the rise. The UN and humanitarian partners also said that needs amongst the migrant population include assistance with legal status, documentation, shelter, access to health care, and other basic services. And so the 1.3 million people are suffering from malnourishment, not malnutrition. Excuse me. And FAO tells us that warned today that the fall armyworm could threaten the livelihoods of millions of small-scale farmers in Asia, as this invasive pest is highly likely to spread further from India. Southeast Asia and South China are most at risk, the agency said. Fall armyworm was recently detected in India and is the first time that it's been found in Asia. This insect can fly over long distances and can cause severe damages to crop like maize, rice, vegetables, and cotton. FAO has offered expertise to farmers and governments in Asia so they can quickly make decisions on how to best manage the pest. More information on the FAO's website. And On Mali, you saw that we issued a statement last night in which the Secretary General congratulated the people of government of Mali for their peaceful atmosphere that prevailed during the second round of the presidential elections that took place on Sunday. The Secretary General also appealed to all parties to remain calm through the conclusion of the electoral process and to continue to address any grievances in accordance with the laws and constitutions of the country. He called on all political leaders to continue to promote a peaceful atmosphere and avoid incendiary rhetoric. And also yesterday we issued a statement in the evening in which the Secretary General welcomed the signing on the Convention of the Legal Status of the Caspian Sea by Azerbaijan, Iraq, Kazakhstan, Russia, and Turkmenistan. And today our honor roll has added 3 new members. We've received payments from Botswana, Egypt, and Tajikistan, which brings us up to 121. All right. I get to ask the first question. Okay, Maggie, go ahead. And then Edie.
Welcome back, Steph.
Thank you.
Mr. Griffith's having these first rounds of talks in September in Geneva on Yemen. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the Secretary General's hopes, expectations for this? I mean, I understand it's a first round, but the situation is very urgent, especially in light of the killings of children and such in Yemen. So could you talk about hopes and expectations?
I don't think we would want to prognosticate on the outcome. This is Mr. Griffith's effort, I think, have shown that he can at least schedule a meeting and bring these people to the table. What we want to see is a stop to the fighting. What we want to see is a stop to the humanitarian suffering. What we want to see is a halt to civilian casualties, which continue in what is a man-made humanitarian crisis.
Can I follow up? Are you any more optimistic standing here today than you were a few months ago, perhaps, that we can get to that sort of conclusion?
I think to quote the Secretary General who quotes Jean Monnet, I'm neither pessimistic or optimistic. I'm just trying to be realistic. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Steph. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Following up on Syria, it appears that this new offensive is now aimed at the last major rebel-held area in Syria, which is, as you said, very densely populated. Has the Secretary General spoken to either senior Russian or Syrian officials to try to ensure the protection of this vast number of civilians?
As you know, the Secretary General did have a conversation recently with Foreign Minister Lavrov, in which Syria was a big part of that discussion. This message of protecting civilians is one that he has conveyed both publicly and privately to all the parties. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Stéphane. Today, some reports said UN issued a calculation of the next year's UN budget. That is, the China will be the second contributor. Can you confirm it?
No, it's the first I've heard of it. Let me check, and I will get back to you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Stéphane. Do you have any comments on the U.S. decision to suspend the treaty with Russia on open skies, which allowed mutual military survey flights? Do you think it can affect badly the international security? Thank you.
No particular comment at this time, but I'll try to get something. Yep.
Thank you, and it's good to see you here again. I have 2 questions. The first one is about the Turkey-U.S. tensions. Your colleague Farhan last week said it's a bilateral matter, but this could have potential impact on your work with regard especially to the Syrian refugee. Does the Secretary General have any comment about these tensions?
I think Farhan did answer the question. Obviously, these bilateral issues can have impact beyond those 2 countries. We hope they do not. We hope that these issues are resolved through dialogue and are resolved. I think it's both the United States and Turkey are two very important countries that play an important role in the region, and we would not want to see these tensions have an impact beyond those two countries.
And my second question is about Syria. Russian military said Tuesday that its forces in Syria will help UN peacekeepers fully restore patrols along the frontier between Syria and Israel on the Golan Heights. As you know, since 2014, I believe the UN forces are not there. Has there been any discussions about this?
We've seen a progressive return of some of the UN forces to their positions at UNDOF.
And will they increase their presence anytime soon?
I think as the conditions on the ground permit, we would like to see our presence increase. Mr. Abadi and then Carol.
Thank you, Stéphane. You announced the release of the report of the Secretary General work.
I did.
On the work of the organization, where he promotes multilateralism. Is the Secretary General convinced that it will be met with wide support?
Well, that surely is his hope. Yes, ma'am.
Stéphane, 2 weeks ago, the Secretary General sent a letter saying he was extremely concerned by the organization's finances. And I'm wondering if you have an update, especially since some states have come forward with paying their dues. Is the situation still dire?
The situation is, and we have, as I said, 3 new member states who have paid in full. We're up to 121. The overall cash flow situation, I think, is one that remains of concern. But I will try to get you some hard numbers. Yeah.
Separate question on whether the Secretary General is still planning to travel to the DRC?
There's no travel to the DRC scheduled as far as I've been made aware. Rhonda, and then...
The DPRK sent around a response to the Secretary General when he was in Japan, saying something about characterizing the DPRK in a way that seemed to sort of take a side in the dispute and to raise sort of the character of the DPRK rather than trying to settle the situation. And I guess what I wonder is we've seen some real step forward in what's happening in the Korean Peninsula situation, but the Security Council is now holding fast to sanctions and isn't particularly supporting there to be a way of supporting there to be a broadening of what's happening. And I'm wondering what the Secretary General feels about what's going on and if he sees himself as recognizing that there's a dispute in hand which has to do with the DPRK. There's still a state of war.
I think the Secretary General is very clear on his position on what needs to be done and what he would like to see, and that position has remained the same and is unchanged. He fully understands the complexity of the crisis, and he fully understands the challenges ahead. But his position itself has not changed.
But there's a question of the armistice rather than the end of the war, and there's a dispute over the end of the war.
Those are issues that will have to be decided by all the parties involved. The UN, the UN command, as it's known, has its roots in history, which goes beyond and before my own presence, but it is one that currently has no links. Either formally or informally with the United Nations, and the Secretary General has no role to play in it. Carla, and then
Thank
Maggie.
you. Since the shortfall in funding the UN has been announced, Senator Ed Markey has called for a reduction in the trillions of dollars being invested in nuclear weapons, and I wonder whether the Secretary General sees any hope. One Trident missile could fund the entire United Nations. Is there any coordination between the members of the U.S. government who are in favor of reducing the funding to the military and transferring the money to the UN.
No, I'm not aware of any discussion. I don't believe there's been any discussion between those people and the Secretary General. Maggie.
Steph, on the Venezuela numbers, 2.3 million seems a really growing refugee crisis. Is there any sort of pledging conference planned or larger, I don't know, involvement by the
question.
UN?
I will check with our humanitarian colleagues.
And so currently are Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, these countries hosting them on their own, or is UNHCR helping support
UNHCR
them?
and others are giving what help they can. Obviously, as with a lot of crises we see around the world, we see neighboring countries showing great generosity, and we would hope that other countries who are able to would also help and support those countries which are hosting these refugees. Yes, sir. And I will check on the pledging on the money issue. Yes, sir.
On the human rights situation in KSA and the arrest of human rights activists and the case of Sama Badawi over 2 weeks ago, the UN statement showed concern but stopped short of asking for the release of Sama Badawi and other activists. Where does the UN stand clearly on that matter?
I think I would refer you to what was said at the time. Thank you very much.